talking about the grizzly bears. We'll be comparing them with black bears and discovering where these grizzly bears are now living, what's being done to protect them, and the fact that, yes, Utah used to have grizzly bears. The difference between a grizzly bear and a black bear isn't necessarily the color. Bears are not always black, or they're not always brown gold. They can be different colors. So knowing some of the other characteristics and that is helpful. A grizzly bear has this big hump on his back, where the black bear is straight across. The grizzly bear comes down and has a definite snout on his face, where this one's gradual. And hopefully, you'll never get close up to their claws to know the difference, but a grizzly bear's claw is longer and less curved than the black bear. The grizzly bear name comes from its golden and gray tips. We're going to go visit Mr. Bear. And you'll notice here, he has this gold color, then he has the darker brown. So some people say it's a grizzly color. And that others say he got his name from being a bear that terrified people. So he was grizzly in the means of a personality of being fierce and vicious. But again, not all grizzly bears are the exact same color. Right here you can see his hump, and we'll talk more about that he has on the back right behind his neck. That is very important for his livelihood. In the United States, and we have 1,400 grizzly bears in lower 48 states. Up in Alaska, there's 30,000 grizzly bears. North America altogether has 50,000 bears in North America, including Canada. There's 728 grizzly bears as of 2019 in Yellowstone. They are now being considered to take them off the endangered list. They were put on the endangered list back in 1972 because when West Yellowstone used to have a garbage dump right by the edge of the park, the grizzly bears and black bears would go there for dinner to get their food. And I can remember as a child, there was even bleachers a distance away from the garbage dump, and you could sit there and watch the bears scrounge. Well, they closed up the dumps. There was a mortality rate because the young grizzly bears had no idea where to get food or how. And so when the numbers got really down low in 1972, they did put them on the endangered list, and it's been a question several times when to take them off or not to, but right now it is being considered. In Yellowstone, the grizzly bears can be taken off the endangered list. A grizzly bear shoulder height is 3 to 4 feet. This would be a young grizzly bear, but he's just my friend from home. Anyway, he would be 3 to 4 feet high. His length would be up to 11 feet long. And when he stands up on his hind legs, he could be up to 14 feet tall. In the lower 48, their average length is probably about 5 feet and height 9 feet when they stand. Because up in Alaska, they get to have salmon, and the salmon runs, and it gives them more fat, and so they become a larger grizzly bear up in Alaska. They can weigh 300 to 850 pounds in the lower 48. Their claws are 4 to 6 inches long, and they're not curved much. If you look from the side, they have a very little curve to them. That's because they're not grabbing hold of things, they're digging with their claws. So they want the larger claws to help with the dig. And you can see that over here. This is where the tips of the grizzly bear claw is to its pad. On a black bear, they're right at the end where they're grabbing hold of things. They're not using them for digging. Their teeth are up to 3 inches long, their fangs here. But look at all those great molars he has. These big molars for grinding up his food. If you look at his nose, it's a rather large nose. He has 7 times the distance and strength of smell as a bloodhound. So there is, comments on food smells and that if you're out into the grizzly country, different fragrances that you might not want to wear around grizzly country because their smell is so great. Here we have an average size of a grizzly bear footprint. And this is about 8 inches in size. Here we have one that was, this bear print was found in 1997 by Trout Creek in Yellowstone. It's 10.5 inches long. The bear probably weighed around 450 pounds to 500 pounds. And that it's been the largest footprint found in Yellowstone. That does not mean there isn't a bear around, because you've got to have the bear step in the right type of mud and people find it in the right time to actually make a cast of the real footprint. But you can see how big their paws are to help with their digging and protection. Grizzly bears are a solitary animal. You will see pictures of them up in Alaska during the salmon run with a group of bears, but they don't come together, they don't mingle together, they're just all there for their salmon for dinner. A male grizzly bear will have a range from 800 to 2,000 square miles that he will live and roam around in. A female only has 300 to 550 square miles. So this, in a way, makes it difficult for the mating of grizzlies. The reproduction rate of a grizzly bear is rather low due to the large distance that they're living in, the large areas. And also we'll talk a little bit more about the cycle for the female. They're good swimmers. They can swim across the river and that. They can sprint at the speed of 40 miles per hour. So don't think about getting up too close and you can run from them, because they are a fast sprinting animal. The hump on their back that we see over here is a large mass of muscle. They have to dig out a den. It's going to take them up to a week to dig out their den. They also are knocking, tearing apart trees, digging for food. So they have this muscle is developed for their help of survival. Their den is usually built on the slope of a hillside, 6,000 feet high, facing north. And the bear will dig it out before snow falls, but they will not enter the den until after there has been substantial snow, and this helps with the scent, the smell of the predator finding them. Also, when they're digging, they dig down so that there is roots and rocks and soil making an overhang into the den to protect them from the weather, and then the snow can sort of slide down and cover the opening in the heavier snow. They make their bed above the entrance level, so if water melts, they're not going to end up waking up in water, and also heat rises, so it'd be warmer. The den is not much larger than the male bear because he just has to wiggle around a little, move, stretch. They're not a solid, continuous hibernator. They do wake up, stir, and sometimes even will go outside. A female will plan on, if she's having cubs, or her cubs lived with her for 2 years, a den that's large enough for her and her cubs. The bears eat plant, bulbs, insects, rodents, and other grubs. They're 85% vegetarian. And in Yellowstone, when there was a problem with the white bark pine, they were concerned about the survival of the grizzlies because that's a big part of their food. They also eat grasses. They have to eat 80 pounds a day, so they're continually foraging during the day. They also eat about 15 to 20% of carcasses, and that they won't go out usually and kill a wolf or a moose or a deer. They'll wait for another animal to do it, or for a natural like winter kill or that, and then when they walk up, any other animal will leave because of the size of them and that. A wolf, even though he's just killed an animal with the pack, they will leave. They're not going to stay around to take on a grizzly bear. They eat 266 different kinds of plants. 15 different invertebrates, and then they consume the Yellowstone cutthroat fish, and they will, if they're living in other areas, and we'll talk about different areas in the lower 48, they will go after fish. In one day, they will go and eat a whole colony of ladybugs or moths. So if you're a ladybug fan, the grizzly bear likes ladybugs too. They receive a lot of their energy from the fleshy fruits in the fall. The fruits contain the high carbonates that they need for fat for winter, what we call hibernation. The grizzly bear's temperature drops only a few degrees while they're hibernating, but they burn up to 8,000 calories a day. This is why they're eating 400 pounds, putting on 400 pounds of weight before they hibernate, because they're going to be going through a lot of calories. Their metabolism can change rapidly. So if they're in a semi-hibernating thing, but danger comes, they can stir, they can be awake, and be prepared. During hibernation, the bear's body turns the toxic waste, usually given off, the urination, into building new muscle tissues. Bear loses some water content, but the body remains balanced because water is formed with the breakdown of body fat. The study of a grizzly bear and his kidneys has been taken to see if there's anything in the research of how their kidneys work that can help humans with their kidney disease. So they're trying to do more studies on understanding it. A grizzly bear, remember, lives to around 20 years. They become mature at 5 years. They mate in the summer, but the female does not become impregnated until hibernation begins. This is to make sure that she has enough of the extra body weight and nutrients so that the cubs, when born, can survive. So there's a lot of miscarriages in the female because the fertilization doesn't take place for 2 to 3 months after. She usually has 2 cubs, but she can have 1 to 4 cubs at a time. They will live with her and she will care for them for up to 2 years. They can nurse up to 3 years, but they start eating solid food at a very young age. And she will not mate during any of the time that she's nursing her cubs, and usually does not mate for another 3 years after. So you figure it's really a 5-year cycle for a grizzly female to have cubs. So now if we look at where are these grizzly bears? Well, we know they're here in Yellowstone with their 780, but we have them also in the Cascades of Washington. They have tagged and recorded 54 grizzlies there. Then over here between Washington and Idaho in Selkirk, there's 31 grizzly bears. Now we're sharing the border with Canada, so some of these bears could migrate from one to the other. And right here we have the Cabinet ecosystem, and there's 54. Over here we have the Northern Continental Divide. There's 1,068. This is up towards your Glacier National Park and that area, very undeveloped area. And down here in Idaho we have an area called Bitterroot. Grizzly bears haven't been there for 100 years of living. They wander in, they wander out. The wildlife is trying to decide if they will sort of establish a group, take some bears in to start having the grizzlies back in this area. It hasn't really been decided. The plan has been proposed for several years, but it right now is not a thing that they're doing, bringing bears back into this area. When you bring grizzly bears back in, you've got farming areas, you've got other things going on, communities. It is a concern for the safety of the people as well as the bears' mortality especially the cubs being hit by cars on roads, people protecting their livestock, and that. Black bears are still allowed to be hunted in several states and that, but on the most part, other than up in Alaska, the grizzly bears are protected at this time. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you again with some science.